Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So, Taryn got a fun and interesting episode for you guys this evening because we're going to be playtesting the most recent release of Final Fight MD, which is basically converting Final Fight over to the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis. Now I know what you're thinking, there is Final Fight CD that does exist, but this version is so much fundamentally better than what we got back in the day. It is night and day different. And of course, Hagar is not going to let the criminals just run through his city. He's going to take off his shirt, put on that one suspender, and go to town. But this is an absolutely amazing conversion of Final Fight to the Mega Drive. It looks, sounds, and feels better than anything that's come before it, and it feels relatively arcade perfect, and in some spots actually has some effects that were never there in the arcade original. Now this is a team effort. It looks like MXRetroDev is the lead of this, with Edmus Prime and Master Lekui. I believe I'm pronouncing that correct, but if I get it wrong, guys, I tried my best. But the work here that they've done is nothing short of spectacular, and you will see those blood spurts coming out as well. That's going to be new to this edition, I believe. But seeing a game I know, love, and remember from the arcades running on the Mega Drive is wild in and of its own right, and the fact that this game looks so incredibly good on stock Sega hardware, even better. Now I am playing this on MiSTer FPGA on the nuked core. It will work on real hardware, and I believe it works in software emulation as well. So whatever you have in your arsenal to play Sega games, this is going to work on it. And if you love Final Fight, you owe it to yourself to check this version out, because it's like they somehow took an entire CPS arcade board and condensed it down to Sega Genesis hardware, because this just looks absolutely outstanding. If I was squinting and not paying too much attention, I would say this was just the arcade original playing in front of me, and it's only when you take a really close look would you might notice that this is not just a CPS board. But again, as we get up to the upper areas here, the enemies are here, the graphics, the backgrounds, the overall look and vibe of Final Fight is 100% intact on this conversion. And again, considering the version we got in the 90s back in the day was so inferior to the arcade original, this is just so great to have. It's the game you know, love, and remember in a completely different way to play hardware wise. And if you've never played Final Fight before, somehow if you're watching this video and you've never actually checked it out, this should be your notification to do that. It's one of the best arcade beat-em-ups of all time, and having this version on the Sega Genesis is just so much fun. Now do be aware this is not finished yet. It is not a full game, but I will definitely update this video next time a new version with more features and more levels comes out, because I had as much fun playing this on the Mega Drive as I ever did on the arcade version. And just seeing a new version of the game running made it even more exciting, because I've played Final Fight so many times. I need something new and fresh to really get that excitement up. But as the enemies jump in here, you might notice every once in a while there might be a little bit of a frame rate dip. This is still a work in progress beta build, and I'm sure a lot of that will be improved in the future. And sometimes when there's too many sprites on the same area of the screen, you might start to see them slightly disappear or a little bit of flickering, and that's going to just be down to some hardware limitations on what it could put up on screen at once. It might be possible to improve that in the future, but if you see it right here in some of the areas where Andore there is falling to the ground, don't be surprised. But the train, the broken windows, all of the artwork, this has been amazingly translated over to the Sega Genesis, and this isn't just a code port. There is a lot of rework done to this, and it does work so well. As we get onto the train here and all those handles sway back and forth in that animated sprite style, it just looks incredible on Sega Genesis hardware. Obviously the Genesis is an old system and it wasn't anywhere near as powerful as the Capcom CPS, but they do have some slight hardware similarities in spots, so it makes sense that you could get something like this out of the Sega Genesis hardware if you knew what you were doing, and the developers of this game clearly know exactly what they're doing, because this just again feels incredible. All of the mechanics, everything that you would want are here. Now some of the throws apparently aren't working yet. I was chatting with somebody else on Discord, Mario, and he told me that a couple throws he couldn't figure out how to execute, so it seems like that beta process may have a few of the deeper commands still not programmed in, but otherwise all of the impacts, the body slam there, everything that Hagar knows how to do that I can do here just feels right, the impact and everything else. And the fun part is getting the music out of the Sega Genesis sound chip is also a really fun time. It's got that nice crunchy Genesis sound that you know, love, and remember from back in the day. So go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds. I'll come back and show you way more of the demo, but enjoy. There's something about the grittiness of the Final Fight soundtrack mixed with the sound hardware of the Sega Genesis that 100% works for me, and that's down to music composer and transcription from Edmus Prime. I'm sure trying to transcribe a lot of this music over to that sound chip was a very heavy lift, but the results that they're getting out of it, I absolutely love. It sounds like Final Fight, but it has that Sega Genesis sound as well, and I think it's an absolutely spectacular combo to put together. As we see here, Hagar beating more dudes up, this is just an incredible game, and again, if you've never played Final Fight before, definitely check it out. Don't eat sushi from the trash. I can't recommend enough to not do that, but otherwise, this is the type of game that you want to play. And I love that we're getting all of these projects. It's been a real hot year for Sega Saturn in January, but the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive are definitely getting a lot more examples of fun new fan games and remakes as well, and this is definitely leading the charge for me personally. And it's been a lot of fun to do videos like this talking about new stuff, so if you want to keep seeing them, leave me a comment down below and tell me if you have anything particular in mind or if you just enjoy them. As we move on to the next boss fight here again, all of those background characters cheering on the fight, all of the artwork here, all of the action just translates so well to the Mega Drive. It is incredible how close this really is to arcade hardware, and having those blood spurts that aren't in the arcade version is just a nice little touch, because you are hitting somebody with a samurai sword, so seeing a little bit of blood spray out is definitely something you would expect to happen in real life, so having it here definitely works, and I can't wait to see what this demo brings for the next time. And it makes me wonder what other Capcom CPS games could be ported to the Sega Genesis. Some of them came over anyway, but it would be really curious to see what other type of games could get this treatment and benefit from them, because this just isn't a straight translation of an arcade game to the Genesis. There's definitely changes and improvements in spots, and that is a ton of fun to see as well. It's always fun to celebrate these new fan experiences, but just like the arcade version, you can totally cheese him out here. Sodom, if you get his blade and you trap him up against the ropes, you can pretty much juggle him almost the entire fight, but that's how it works. Beat 'em ups always had a strategy to them. If you knew what to cheese, you could basically 1cc a game just by taking advantage of what it was trying to keep you from doing. But you'll see here we moved on from round 2, and now we're going to go right into round 3. And again, you get to beat up a car. Don't know what it is about these games, they just absolutely hate vehicles and you need to destroy them. But this screen in particular, with one car on screen, no flickering on the sprites of enemies when they line up too much, if this was anything other than Capcom CPS gameplay, I would have a very hard time telling. I'm sure there's some color shift and very minor details here and there, but the entire experience is coming over so well, and I would definitely recommend playing this version, even though it's not finished, over Final Fight CD on the Sega CD, and I do have that in my collection, as well as a PCB for Final Fight, so it's not like I'm lacking for ways to play this game. And again, these Genesis colors with the development from Capcom here, this back alley with those light purples that kind of turn into pinks, and that rust color brown in the brick there, works so well on the Sega hardware. The Genesis always had a particular look, and I would say it definitely hewed way more towards the Capcom CPS and to a lesser extent CPS2 look than something like a Super Nintendo did. So this is just a really good piece of hardware to bring a game like this over to. And I will say, just like the arcade version, you don't want to get too many enemies around you at the same time, or else you can use that super attack to knock them all back. But just like in the arcade, you're definitely going to lose some of your health bar doing that. It is a risk versus reward mechanic. But considering there is a limit of 4 enemies on screen at once, unless you pivot around with the options, this game is relatively easier than the arcade version at normal. But I'm going to give you one more sample of what the sound sounds like coming out of that Genesis sound chip, because I absolutely love how they've pivoted the music to sound both familiar and different at the same time. So enjoy, and I'll be right back. Again, so uniquely familiar and different at the same time, and that's what is really fun about this. And pretty much every platform, whether it was arcade, console, handheld, or otherwise, had a particular sound to its music unless it was using Redbook audio off of a CD. So here on the Sega Genesis, it has that nostalgic sound I love. I'm not saying that the Sega Genesis has the best sound hardware of the generation. It definitely can be flawed in spots, but it is quintessentially Sega sounding music, and getting the Final Fight soundtrack out of those chips is quintessentially Sega through and through. And you'll see here as we get taken down to this fighting ring and fight these two dudes. I've always wondered why they just have a ring underneath that bar and restaurant. Kind of has some Deer Hunter vibe going on if you ask me. But as we continue to move on again, I just love that in 2024 and pretty much every year, there are fans out there dedicating their time to doing something like this. Does the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive need a new port of Final Fight? Definitely not. There's so many ways to play the arcade original. We are not lacking for options, but this is a love letter to the game and to the franchise, and for that we 100% need experiences like this. For every new game we get on old hardware, I love getting an old game on old hardware pivoted over to an adjacent piece of old hardware. Again, I'm not sure why there's turkeys and signs, but let's not argue with it. Castlevania told us meat can be eaten from walls, so I guess Final Fight says break open a sign and you will get a roast chicken. But just moving through this demo, it is so highly polished at its current state, and it isn't even done yet, so I can't wait to see what the next version brings. More levels, more polish, more moves, more of everything. I would not know that this was not a retail release game if I wasn't obviously aware of this being a fan-made demo at this point in time. And that's always the highest praise I can heap on something when it is made by fans and not developers from back in the 90s. If it feels like something that I could have went out into the store and bought with my newspaper delivery route money in the 90s, then that means it is as good as gold. And in a lot of cases, what fans make today is more impressive than developers did back in the day. But of course, they have the advantage of no budgets, no time constraints, and 20 plus years of research and development into the hardware and new software development kit tools to be able to impress you even more. But that's exactly what the developers of Final Fight MD did here. They impressed the ever-loving hell out of me. This is a 10 out of 10 experience, and it's not even done, and I can't wait to see what happens in the next update. But short of that, that's the demo. Go ahead and play it. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, but I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.